The radio was down to static, and the canyon below looked like an open, wound cut into the earth, a jagged stretch of rock and smoke where sound vanished into heat. The rescue team had lost contact 20 minutes earlier. The SEALs on the ground were pinned between two ridges, trapped by enemy fire echoing from unseen cliffs. Every path out had turned into fire. Communications back at the base said extraction was impossible. The terrain too dangerous. The anti-air systems too close. Then a voice came through the noise, calm and bright amid the chaos. "This is Viper Command. I've got eyes on the canyon." It was her. Call sign Wraith 2, the pilot everyone talked about, but few had met. Rumors said she was reckless. Others said fearless. She was the last one still circling in range when everyone else pulled back. The controller's answer came rough with disbelief. "Ground team compromised. Too hot for close air support. Repeat, do not enter the canyon." Her reply was quiet but final. "Copy, Command, then I'm not close air support, I'm rescue." She kicked the throttle forward, and the A-10 thundered lower. From the ground, the SEALs saw only the shadows sweeping past the ridgeline, the sound of engines rising, and then the first streak of light arcing through the dust as her cannon opened. The roar tore across the canyon, the 15-second burst shaking rock loose from the walls. She carved a path between the crossfire and the stalled unit, cutting off one position, drawing return fire upward toward her instead. Bullets sparked harmlessly against the armored body of the aircraft, the sound like hail on steel. The leader on the ground radioed breathlessly that she was insane, that it couldn't be done, but her voice came back steady. "Mark smoke blue north line." They launched a colored grenade, the plume drifting under the arid wind. She saw it once, rolled hard left, almost scraping wingtip against stone, and lined up for another pass. Inside the cockpit, she felt the tremor of every shot ripple through her seat. The canyon narrowed, the instruments screamed warnings, but she stayed locked on. The second run shredded the ridge that had trapped the SEALs. Dust erupted everywhere, turning daylight into a storm. When she pulled upward, the altimeter flickered with red. She skimmed out of the canyon with meters to spare, alarm lights flashing, heart punching against body armor. Over the radio came her breathless laugh, only half a sound. "Paths open, boys, move." The SEALs rallied through the confusion, dragging their wounded toward the newly cleared corridor. From above, she saw lights waving, a signal to cover them. She dove once more, engines howling, laying down suppressive fire until the evac chopper came through the smoke. The dust was still settling across the canyon floor when the SEALs reached the plateau. They stumbled through haze that smelled of cordite and iron, their boots sliding on loose rock. Each man had assumed the run was his last, that the firefight would end buried under sand and stone. Instead, they had survived, saved by a pilot who should not have been there. The team leader collapsed behind a boulder, catching his breath. Radio pressed to his ear. "Wraith 2, this is ground, we're clear, repeat, we're clear." No answer came, just static. Above them, scraps of smoke drifted where the A-10 had disappeared into sun glare. For a moment, a pulse of fear hit harder than the gunfire had. Without her covering fire, the canyon seemed too wide, the silence too heavy. Then her voice cracked back through the radio. Rough, shaking with exhaustion, but unmistakable. "Copy ground, good work down there. Try not to scare me like that again." Back at forward command, everyone had been yelling into headphones for 10 minutes, demanding to know which pilot had ignored the abort code. When the radar finally picked up the low signature of her A-10, limping out of the valley, controllers burst into stunned cheers. Her fuel reading sat dangerously close to empty. Every system warning glowed amber or red. She shut down one engine to save the rest. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline burning itself out through her veins. She wiped sweat from her eyes, watching sunlight spill over the rim of the desert. The controller's voice came over the headset. "Wraith 2, you disobeyed direct orders." She smiled faintly, leaning her head back against the seat. "Affirmative, Command, I'll add it to my list. Request immediate refuel and recovery crew." By the time she landed the next morning, the base fell silent. Crew ran to the runway, squinting at the blackened paint, the bullet scars scoring the sides of the aircraft. When she jumped from the ladder, her legs nearly gave out. The colonel met her halfway, jaw tight with anger he couldn't hold. "You were supposed to stand down," he barked. "You were outnumbered, outgunned, and you could have died out there." She nodded once, voice steady. "I could have. They would have, for sure." News moved fast across the network. Within hours, the footage from the drone feed reached headquarters. Analysts replayed it again and again, the moment her jet vanished between cliffs, the split second when the tracers carved open the canyon. They all knew she had done what every soldier dreams of doing once in their life, defying odds not for glory, but because someone else was trapped. Later that night, as she cleaned her flight gear, a young mechanic approached hesitantly. "Everyone thought that canyon was death, ma'am," he said. She glanced at him, tired but with a flicker of warmth. "It was," she replied, "until we flew into it." Morning came with a yellow glare spreading across the desert base. The report of what had happened circulated through every tent and hangar before sunrise. Mechanics whispered while they worked. Medics nodded quietly to each other in hallways. Even the breakfast line paused when she walked past. She hated the attention. She just wanted to see the team she had pulled from that canyon. The commander tried to keep her grounded for debriefing, but she slipped out of the office and headed straight toward the field hospital. The medics glanced up as the door opened and the smell of antiseptic filled her nose. For a moment she worried the men wouldn't want to see her. Heroes belonged in stories, not in the exhausted reality of recovery. But when she appeared at the end of the ward, every head turned. The SEAL leader dropped his spoon, his bandaged arm frozen mid-movement. One of the younger ones grinned through stitched lips and forced himself upright just to give her a salute. She shook her head quickly. "Don't," she murmured. "There's no rank where I flew today." They wouldn't stop thanking her. One said he had already written to his family, telling them about the sound of her engine echoing down the rocks. Another described how seeing the smoke from her cannon had pulled them together after hours of thinking no one knew they were alive. She stood there awkwardly, shoulders stiff, trying to hide the emotion creeping up her throat. The leader watched her closely, understanding what she couldn't admit, that the same stubborn spirit that had saved them also haunted her. When she left the ward, the sunlight felt too bright. She walked across the tarmac where her aircraft sat scarred but whole. The crew had already repainted half the fuselage, though burn marks still traced the panels. Someone had stenciled a small blue outline of the canyon on the nose, with 7 tiny dots representing the men she saved. She stared at it for a long time, hand resting on the cool metal. Inside her chest, quiet mixed with fatigue. The base commander approached, slower this time, no one else around. He didn't bark orders or mention procedure. Instead, he asked if she needed anything. She replied that she just wanted a minute with the jet. He nodded and walked away without another word. As the wind picked up, sand swirling in circles around her boots, she exhaled for the first time since diving into that canyon. She realized she had carried those, men's fear as her own, and somehow emerged lighter. The name Wraith, once chosen because she flew unseen, now felt less like a ghost and more like proof that sometimes ghosts can bring the living back home. That night, the base was quieter than usual. The noise of repairs, engines, and drills faded early. The desert stretched out in every direction, lit only by a low red moon. She sat beside the old A-10, hands resting on her helmet, gaze fixed on the stars above the runway lights. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust, the kind of scent that never left a pilot's skin. Somewhere far across the sand, the men she had rescued were being airlifted back to their families. She listened to the faint hum of their departing transport and let the tension leave her shoulders. For years, she had lived between one mission and the next, moving like machinery through battles that blurred together. This time it felt different, because for once she had flown, not for orders or objectives, but for people. The base commander found her there, standing under the starlight. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said quietly that higher command had been reviewing every second of her flight recording, that what she had pulled off would be studied in training for a decade. She shrugged, still looking up at the clear sky. "They'll learn one thing," she said softly, "that people matter more than plans." He nodded. "I think they already did." After he left, she dragged a folding chair to the wing of her plane and sat down, tracing one finger over the fresh blue stencil painted by the crew. The canyon symbol glowed faintly against the gray metal, the 7 small dots beneath it glimmering under the floodlights. Her call sign had always meant silence and shadow, a ghost on the radar. Now it carried something heavier. News networks back home were already broadcasting her flight path, the impossible maneuver through enemy fire, The rescue accomplished after the mission had been called off. Pilots everywhere watched grainy footage of her plane, dipping between cliffs that seemed to touch the ground. They talked about bravery and skill, but none of them could feel the sudden stillness inside the cockpit, the loneliness of that dive. Before dawn, she climbed into the cockpit again, not to fly, but to sit in the familiar seat, hands on the controls, eyes on the horizon turning gray. The desert wind seeped through the broken seals around the canopy, and she smiled faintly at the sound. Every beat of her heart matched the slow pulse of memories coming back, the gunfire, the voices screaming through static, the moment of quiet before the canyon opened. She whispered a thank you to the silence that had followed her down, there and carried her back up. Somewhere across the desert, the sun broke, sharp and bright, painting the aircraft in gold. She watched it rise until it blinds her eyes, whispering into the wind what no one else would ever hear. Even when everything gives up, someone still has to dive in.